page 78 continued. Question 14. What picture of childhood does Lamb give in the essay? Quote, "Trim children are every," unquote, question mark. Answer C. Answer to question 13, para 4. Bracket, Lamb has a natural fondness, ... bracket closed. Question 15. Write a critical appreciation of Lamb's, quote, "Trim children are every," unquote, stop. Calcutta University, 1992. Answer C. Answer to question 12. Question 16. Discuss how the real is mixed with the unreal in, quote, "Trim children are every," unquote, stop. Calcutta University, 1991. Answer. Dream Children is the reverie of a man who lived a tragic life. It is a mixture of reality and dream. Here, Lamb speaks about his grandmother, Mrs. Field, who was a housekeeper in a big house at Norfolk. He gives a vivid picture of the old lady bent with cancer, good, kind, and religious. He used to visit the house during vacations and enjoyed the walks in the gardens. He depicts his loving relationship with his elder brother John and with faithful Bridget, who was his sister Mary. Lamb's unfortunate love affair of his early life with Anne Simmons is poetically referred to in the essay. He tells how he courted Alice W-N for long 7 years through hope and despair and was at last rejected. Para. Thus, Lamb presents facts about his life. He also expresses his unfulfilled longings. He wished to get married and have children and to live blissful domestic life. The essay is imbued with a tragic sense of the unrealized longings. Printing mistake. It contains a fanciful or imaginary accounts of his talks with children whom he never had and who therefore are called, quote, "Trim children," unquote, stop. John and Alice are his dream children. The fair Alice W-N is his dream wife, and Bartram is the imaginary husband of Alice W-N, stop. Thus, the real and the unreal are mixed in the essay. Lamb deludes himself into fancifying that he had got children, and he tells them the stories about his grandmother, his elder brother, his love of old house, old garden, fishes, and animals. There is a sweet pathos in the recollection of things and emotions that are not real. Mrs. Field, her house, her gardens, elder brother John, Bridget, within bracket Mary, Bartram, mystified name of the father of the son, are real, but his visions about his sons, his beloved, his stories, and to the children, their responses are unreal. Dreams and memories, fun and fantasy give a profound emotional power to the essay. Question 17. How does Lamb bring out the peculiarities of children in his essay, quote, "Dream children are every," unquote, question mark. Answer. Lamb has a natural fondness for children. With a true paternal affection, he depicts his dream children, satisfies their childish curiosity, and tolerates their follies. Children love to hear stories. The traits of childhood are accurately and humorously put in again and again. Quote, "Here John smiled," unquote, as much as to say, quote, "That would be foolish indeed," unquote, stop. Quote, "Here Alice spread her hands," unquote, when Lamb tells his dream children how his grandmother knew all the psaltery. When he tells that his grandmother was the best dancer, Alice's right foot played an involuntary movement. When he tells his dream children about the apparitions, John expanded his eyebrows and tried to be courageous. When Lamb says that his diversions about peaches, nectarines, oranges, John deposited upon the plate a bunch of grapes which he takes and intends to divide with his sister. Para. Lamb inspires us with a new beauty of children, their imitativeness, their generous emotions, their anxiety to correct, and their easy manner of escaping from grief to joy. His love of children is shown in his imaginative picture of children gathering round him to listen to his story. Page 80. Short questions, objectives, and answers. Question 1. What stories children love to listen? Why do they love to listen to stories? Answer. Children love to listen to stories about the childhood of their elders. Para. They love to listen to the stories of the childhood of their elders because they want to extend their imagination to the childhood of their great-grand-aunt and great-grandfather of old days whom they never saw. Question 2. What is meant by, quote, a traditionary great-uncle or grandam, unquote, question mark? Answer. Quote, a traditionary, traditionary, great-uncle or grandam, unquote, is one whom the children had not seen but about whom they have heard many stories. Tradition has grown about them. Question 3. I was in the spirit that my little ones crept about me. Who were the little ones within quote? What was, quote, spirit, unquote, question mark? Why did they creep about the author? Answer. The, quote, little ones, unquote, are the dream children of the author, Charles Lamb. Lamb was unmarried, but in his sleep he dreamed about his children creeping about him. They wanted to hear stories about their great-grandmother, Mrs. Field. The, quote, spirit, unquote, refers to the eagerness of the children to hear stories about great-grandmother and great-grand-uncle. Question 4. Where did the author's grandmother live? Question mark. What tragic incidents are associated with the place? Question mark. Para. Answer. Mrs. Field was Lamb's grandmother. Lamb's grandmother lived in a great house in Norfolk. It was 100 times bigger than that in which the children and their father lived. Para. The house or the part of the place was the scene of many tragic incidents that are narrated in the Ballad of the Children in the Wood. It was the story of a cruel uncle and two children who were murdered by the uncle. They were left without any burial. Two robin redbreasts, within bracket birds, took pity on them and covered their dead bodies with leaves and gave them decent burial. Question 5. Where and how was the Ballad of the Children in the Wood carved? What was the fate of the object? Answer. The whole story of children and their cruel uncle was seen fairly carved out in wood upon the chimney piece of the great hall. Para. It was kept there till a foolish rich person pulled it down to set up a marble one of modern invention with no story upon it. Question 6. Here Alice put out one of her dear mother's looks, ... Who was Alice? Who was her dear mother? What is meant by, quote, here, unquote, question mark? What looks are referred to? Page 81. Answer. Alice was the dream daughter of Charles Lamb. Her mother was called Alice W-N. Alice was his dream child and her mother was his dream wife. Lamb was married. Lamb was unmarried. Dream is his wish fulfillment. Para, quote, here, unquote, means at the point of Lamb's story told to his dream children. Lamb told that a foolish rich person pulled down the chimney piece of the great hall and set up a marble one of modern invention. Para. Alice's looks were tender rather than reproaching. She was tender to the children in the ballad and not reproaching to the cruel uncle of the Ballad of the Children of the Wood. Question 7. In some respects, she might be said to be the mistress of this great house. Stop. About whom is this said? About whom is this said? Question mark. What, quote, great house, unquote, is referred to, question mark. In what respects was she the mistress? Question mark. Answer. This is said about Mrs. Field, the grandmother of Lamb. Para. The, quote, great house in Norfolk, unquote, is referred to. Here Mrs. Field used to live. She was not the owner of the house, but she had the charge of it. The owner committed the charge of the house to Mrs. Field, and he lived in a fashionable house in the adjoining country. Mrs. Field kept up the dignity of the house and lived as if it had been her own. Question 8. What became the fate of the great house in which Mrs. Field lived? Answer. The great house was pulled down when it came to decay. All of its ornaments were taken and carried to the owner's fashionable house. They looked odd in the new house. They were old and befitted the old house. Question 9. How does Lamb compare the carrying away of the old ornaments of the great house to the owner's house? Question mark. Answer. Lamb compares the carrying away of the old ornaments of the great house to the owner's house to the carrying away of old tombs at the Westminster Abbey to the fashionable, artificially decorated house of the owner's wife. Question 10. Who is, quote, Lady C, unquote, question mark. What is meant by, quote, tawdry gilt drawing room, unquote, question mark. Answer. Quote, Lady C, unquote, is the wife of the foolish rich man who purchased a fashionable house and pulled down the great house in Norfolk. Para. Quote, tawdry gilt drawing room, unquote, means artificially and gaudily, gaudily, decorated drawing room. Question 11. Here John smiled, comma, as much to say, quote, that would be foolish indeed, unquote, stop. Who was John? Where did John smile? What did he mean to be foolish? Page 82. Answer. John was the dream son of Charles Lamb. He was called John in recollection of John Lamb, the brother of Charles. Para. John smiled at the point of the author's story about the foolishness of the rich man in carrying away the ornaments of the old great house to his new fashionable house. Para. John admitted that it was foolish through his smile. Question 12. Who attended the funeral of Mrs. Field? Question mark. Why was Mrs. Field popular? Question mark. Answer. Mrs. Field's death was mourned by the vast crowd of the poor people and some gentlemen of the locality for many miles round. Para. Mrs. Field was good and religious. She knew all the Psalms by heart and a great portion of the Testament. Question 13. Here Alice spread her hands. Where Alice spread her hands? Question mark. Why did she do? Question mark. Answer. Alice spread her hands at the point of Lamb's story about the good and religious character of Mrs. Field. Lamb said that Mrs. Field knew the Psalms and a great part of the Testament. Para. Alice spread her hands to show her religious feelings. Question 14. Alice's little right foot played an involuntary movement. When did Alice's right foot play an involuntary movement? Question mark. Answer. Alice's right foot played an involuntary movement when Lamb told that his grandmother, Mrs. Field, had a tall, upright, graceful appearance, and she was esteemed the best dancer. Her right foot instinctively moved in rhythmic posture. Question 15, quote, those innocents would do here no harm, unquote, stop. Who said this? About whom is this said? Why would not they do any harm? What was the reaction of the narrator? What was the reaction of the listeners? Answer. Mrs. Field used to say this when she had told the writer about her belief that ghosts of two murdered children, as related in the Ballad of Children in the Wood, appeared every midnight. They glided up and down the staircase where she slept. She slept in a lone chamber of the lonely house. Para. The writer used to be frightened by the story of the ghosts but Mrs. Field assured them that they did no harm to her. Para. Lamb's listeners were also frightened, but Lamb expanded her eyebrows to look courageous. Page 83. Question 16. How did Lamb spend his days in the great house of Mrs. Field? Answer. Lamb used to spend his house alone by gazing upon the old bus of 12 Caesars, by roaming about in the empty rooms of the huge mansion, and in the spacious old gardens. Question 17. What was Lamb's feeling when he saw the old bus of 12 Caesars? Answer. Lamb used to gaze upon the old bus of 12 Caesars who were emperors of Rome. He used to feel that the old marble heads would live again and he would be turned into marble with them. Thus he felt emotionally identified with them. Question 18. They were forbidden fruit, unless now and then. Question 18. They were forbidden fruit, unless now and then. Which were, forbidden fruits, unquote, question mark. Is there any illusion in the expression, question mark? What is meant by, quote, now and then, unquote, question mark? Answer. Charles Lamb used to roam about in the old-fashioned spacious garden of the great house of Mrs. Field in Norfolk. He used to see many fruits like nectarines and peaches, but he did not pluck them and taste them. Para. They were, quote, forbidden fruit, unquote, as the apple was a forbidden fruit to Adam in the Garden of Eden. God asked Adam and Eve not to touch the tree of knowledge, tree, T capital, knowledge, K capital, and eat its fruit. Para, quote, unless now and then, unquote, means that sometimes he felt tempted to pluck these sweet fruits. Question 19, quote, because I had more pleasure, unquote, ... Who said this? What were his pleasures? What were his other pleasures? Answer. Lamb said this to his dream children. He was speaking about his pleasures in roaming about the spacious gardens in the great house of his grandmother, Mrs. Field. He used to walk about among yew trees and the firs and pick up the red berries and the fir apples. He lied himself upon the fresh grass. Para. His other pleasures were the nectarines and peaches which hung upon the walls. He could not pluck them and taste them. Question 20. What was the feeling of Lamb when he basked in the orangery? What is the orangery? Answer. Quote, orangery, Orangery, unquote, is the glass-roofed conservatory, artificially heated in which oranges are grown. Lamb often warmed himself in the orangery. Para. In the orangery, Lamb had the pleasant feeling of identifying himself with the oranges ripening. He felt that he was also ripening. Page 84. Question 21. I had more pleasure in these busy idle diversions. What were the, quote, busy idle diversions, unquote, question mark? What does he mean by, quote, diversions, unquote, question mark? Answer. Quote, busy idle diversions, unquote, refer to Lamb's wanderings in the gardens among the yew trees and the firs, red berries and fir apples which he used to pick up. He laid himself on the fresh grass with all the fine smells about him. He basked in the orangery and fancied himself ripening like the oranges and the limes. He watched the river fish moving to and fro in the fish pond. Para. These are the diversions. They were busy because they absorbed him and idle because they were frivolous and light. Bracket, not serious, bracket close, stop. Question 22. What were the fruits, trees and fish mentioned by Lamb in his account of the pleasures in the garden attached to the great house of Mrs. Field? Question mark. Answer. Charles Lamb mentions fruits like nectarines, peaches, red berries and fir apples. Among the trees he liked the melancholy-looking yew trees and firs. He watched the dace, D-A-C-E, moving to and fro in the fish pond, and a sullen, large, voracious freshwater fish hanging midway down the water. Question 23. What were the, quote, baits of children, unquote, question mark? How did John and Alice reacted at the mention of these baits, question mark? Answer, quote, baits of children, unquote, mean common temptations of children. They are attracted to peaches, nectarines, oranges, as fishes are attracted to the baits in the forms of some items of food. Para. John took the expression, quote, baits of children, unquote, as an admonition to him, and so put down on the table the fruits that he had taken up to eat. He meant the grapes to be shared with his sister, but both of them were ready to give up the grapes as irrelevant, not suitable to the occasion. Question 14. Here John slyly deposited back upon a plate a bunch of grapes, ... What is meant by, quote, here? Meant printing mistake. Why did he deposit back a bunch of grapes upon a plate on the table, question mark? Answer, quote, here, unquote, means the point where Lamb was speaking about the fruits like peaches and nectarines. These are the baits of children. See answer to question 22. Question 25. Whom did Mrs. Field love most? What were the qualities of the man mentioned, and how was his conduct different from others? Answer. Lamb's grandmother, Mrs. Field, loved all grandchildren, but loved his brother, bracket, the uncle of his dream children, bracket closed, most. Para. Uncle John was a handsome and spirited young man, and was superior to them as a king is superior to common men. He used to walk gloomily in solitary places. Page 85. He would mount, like some of them, on the most spirited horse when he was a mere child. He would ride on the horse and join the hunters. Question 26. But had too much spirit. About whom is this said? What spirit of the man is indicated? Answer. This is said about Charles Lamb's brother, John Lamb. John loved the great house in Norfolk, but he was not to be confined within the boundary. He would ride on a horse which would carry him half over the country. I think it should be county, and he would join the hunters. He grew up to manhood as brave and handsome. Question 27, quote, how he used to carry me upon his back, unquote, ... Who said this and about whom? Question mark. Why did the person carry him upon his back? Question mark. What did Lamb do in his similar circumstances? Question mark. Answer. Charles Lamb said this about his brother John Lamb. Para. John used to carry him on his back because Charles was lame-footed and could not walk for pain. Para. John became lame-footed after amputation, but Charles could not treat him with due indulgence when pain made him impatient. Question 28. Such a distance there is betwixt life and death. Who says this? In what context is this said? What feeling of the speaker is revealed here? Answer. Charles Lamb says this in Dream Children. This is said by Charles when he narrated to his dream children the death of his brother John. Para. This narration reveals the deep feelings of Charles. He died an hour ago, but he felt that it was an age of separation. He felt a great distance between life and death. What was so near seemed so distant. Death brings a great change in our life. Question 29. How does Lamb express his feelings for the death of his brother? What was his attitude to his brother during his lifetime? Answer. When his brother John dies, Lamb felt a great separation from his brother. He found it difficult to bear with the loss. The loss haunted him. He missed him always. Para. Lamb was not so affectionate to his brother when he was alive. He did not treat his brother with the due consideration of kindness when he suffered from pain due to injury to his foot. Question 30. How does Lamb express his sense of loss of his brother when the latter, it should be latter, printing mistake, when the latter died? Answer. Charles Lamb was extremely sad at the sudden death of his brother John. John was kind to him, cross with him, gentle and rough, page 86. But after his death, Charles missed his kindness and roughness. He wanted him to be alive and to quarrel with him. Question 31, quote, when the doctor took off his limb, ... unquote, whose limb is spoken of, question mark, in what context is this said, question mark, answer. Charles Lamb expresses his feelings on the death of his brother John. He tells his dream children that their uncle John felt greatly pained when his limb was amputated because it was a part of him. Similarly, Lamb felt the pain of separation from his brother when the latter died. His brother was a part of him. Question 32. Quote, here the children felt a crying, crying, unquote. Why did the children cry, question mark? What did they ask the narrator to tell them next, question mark? Answer, the children cried when Lamb told them that his pain of separation from his brother was as acute as the pain of his brother when his limb was amputated. The children felt sympathy both for John and Charles Lamb at their pains, so they cried. Para. They did not want to hear more about John. They wanted Charles to tell them more about their pretty dead mother, Alice W-N. Stop. Question 33, quote, the soul of the first Alice looked out at her eyes, unquote, stop. Who is the, quote, first Alice, unquote, question mark? Whose eyes are referred to, question mark? How did this look affect the narrator, question mark? Answer. The first Alice is Alice W-N, whom Lamb courted but could not marry. Alice W-N within bracket, Alice Winterton is the feigned F-E-I-G-N-E-D name under which Lamb refers to his early love, Anne Simmons. Para. The eyes of the second Alice, that is the daughter of Alice, are referred to. Para. The narrator, Charles Lamb, doubted whether it was Alice the mother or Alice the daughter that was before him. Question 13, quote, while I stood gazing, unquote, dash. Who stood gazing and at what, question mark? What happened with what he gazed at, question mark? Answer. Charles Lamb, the narrator of the story to his dream children, stood gazing. He gazed at the dream children. They gradually fell away from him further and further until at last nothing of their figures was visible except the faint and shadowy outlines of their faces in the far-away distance. Question 35. Quote, as much as children could understand, unquote, stop. In what context was this said, question mark? What did he mean by it, question mark? Page 87. Answer. Charles Lamb said this when he was telling about his courtship with Alice W-N, the dead mother of his dream children. Children could not understand the matter, but he tried to tell them so far as he could make it clear to them. He told them about his hope and despair, the bashfulness and unwillingness of the girl. Question 36, quote, which, without speech, strangely impressed upon the effects of speech, unquote, dash. What is meant by, quote, which, unquote, question mark? What is the occasion of the speech, question mark? How did the speechlessness impress the speaker with the effects of speech? Answer, quote, which, unquote, means the two mournful figures that receded in the far distance. Para. The dream children became fainter and fainter until they became shadowy figures. They did not have any power of speech. Para. The shadowy figures looked at Lamb without speech, but they impressed him with the effects of speech because they, by withdrawing into distance, suggested to him that they were not of Alice or of Lamb. Question 37, quote, "We are not of Alice, comma, nor of thee, comma, nor we children at all," unquote, ... Whose speech is quoted here? Question mark. Who was Alice? Question mark. What were they? Question mark. Answer. This speech seemed to come from the dream children of Lamb. They were gradually melting into air, and they seemed to suggest these words to the imagination of Charles Lamb. Para. Alice was Alice W-N, comma, mother of Lamb's dream children. Stop. Alice W-N is the feigned name under which Lamb alludes to his early love, Anne Simmons. Para. They were dream children, not children of flesh and blood. They were the creations of Lamb's imagination. Question 38. Who was, quote, Bartram, unquote, question mark. What did the dream children say to Lamb as they receded? Answer. Quote, Bartram, comma, Bartrum, was the father of Alice's children. Anne Simmons was married to Mr. Bartram, a pawnbroker of Leicester Square, Leicester, Leicester, Square, comma, London. Para. The dream children said that they were not the children of Lamb. They were dream figures to Lamb, but actually they were the children of Alice and Bertram. Question 39, quote, "We are only what might have been," unquote, stop. Who said this and to whom? Question mark. What is meant by, quote, "might have been," unquote, question mark? Answer. The dream children said this to Charles Lamb. Para. Alice and John are the dream children of Lamb. They are the products of Lamb's wish fulfillment. They might have been Lamb's children if Lamb had married Anne Simmons, bracket Alice W-N. Page 88, question 40. Quote, "Must wait upon the tedious shores of Lethe, ... unquote. Who said this and to whom? What is, quote, Lethe, unquote? What is meant by, quote, tedious shores, unquote? For what would they wait? Answer. The dream children of Lamb said this to Lamb. Para. Lethe is the river of Hades, Hades, the water of which causes forgetfulness according to Greek mythology. A person has to cross the river after death for going to hell. Para, quote, tedious shores, unquote, is a case of transferred epithet, stop. Shores are not tedious, comma, long waiting on the shores is tedious. Para. They would wait for ages by the shores of river of forgetfulness before they can be born in this world. They are now creatures of fancy. It would take ages for them to have any real existence. Question 41. I found myself quietly seated in my bachelor armchair. Who says this and on what occasion? Question mark. What is meant by the, quote, bachelor armchair, unquote, question mark? Who was by his side and whom did he miss? Question mark. Answer. Charles Lamb says this when his dream is broken and he returns to reality. Para, quote, bachelor armchair, unquote, means that Lamb was a bachelor. He was once sitting in his armchair and fell dozing and dreaming. He was building all time a world of love, marriage and children. The dream is his wish fulfillment. He could not realize in actual life what he wished. Para. Bridget, the feigned name of Mary Lamb, Lamb's loving sister, was ever faithful to Lamb and was by his side. But he missed his brother John Lamb, James Eliah. Question 42. Who are lambs, quote, little ones, unquote, in the essay Dream Children Are Every, question mark, Calcutta University 1990. Answer, quote, little ones, unquote, are the dream children of lamb. They are Alice and John. Question 43. Who are lambs, quote, dream children, unquote, question mark, Calcutta University 1992. Answer, lambs, quote, dream children, unquote, are Alice and John. Stop. Question 44. Who came to attend Grandmother Field's funeral and why did they come, question mark. Answer, the crowd of all the poor and some of the gentry of the neighborhood for many miles around came to attend the funeral of Mrs. Field. They attended her funeral because she had been such a good and religious woman. Question 45. Where did Mrs. Field live? Question mark. What was her status? Question mark. Calcutta University 1994. Answer. Mrs. Field lived in a great house in Norfolk. She was not the mistress to the house, but she had the charge of it. Page 89. Question 46. Quote, how and when he died, unquote. Who died? Question mark. What was the effect of his death upon the author? Question mark. Calcutta University 1995. Answer. Lamb's elder brother John Lamb died. Though he had not been dead an hour, it seemed as if he had died a great while ago. Such was the distance between life and death. He bore his death at first, and then it haunted him. He did not cry, but he missed his kindness, his crossness, and wished him to be alive. Explanations. 1. Children love to listen to stories about their elders when they were children, semicolon, to stretch their imagination to the conception of a traditionary great uncle or grandame, comma, who they never saw. Para. In these opening lines of his essay, quote, Dream Children Are Every, unquote, Lamb states some very common characteristics of young children. Being young themselves, they love to hear from the mouth of their superiors how they, the superiors in their childhood, behaved themselves, what they did, etc. These stories of their elders' childhood are very much interesting to the children. Particularly, they like to hear stories about their grandfathers or grandmothers who are long dead and gone and whom they had never seen. By hearing such stories from their elders, the children like to picture to themselves by means of their imagination these great grandfathers and grandmothers. It is this inherent tendency of children which one evening led the young ones of the writer, bracket, who exist only in dreams and not in reality, bracket closed, to request their father to tell them stories about their grandfather or grandmother. 2. Certain it is that the whole story of the children and their cruel uncle was to be seen fairly carved out in wood upon the chimney piece of the great hall, comma, the whole story down to the robin redbreast. Stop. Para. In speaking about his grandmother Mrs. Field to his dream children, Lamb says that she lived in great house in Norfolk as a caretaker. The house had a rich literary association. There is a popular ballad named Children in the Wood, the story of which the author is said to have narrated to John and Alice, bracket, the boy and girl, bracket closed, only recently. He now says that the house in which Mrs. Field lived was supposed to be the scene where the tragic incidents narrated in the ballad had occurred. The ballad says how the cruel uncle of two children, a boy and a girl in whose charge the father at his death had left them, tried to get their fortune by murdering them. Accordingly, he hired two ruffians for murdering them, but they took pity and left the children in the wood instead of murdering them. There the children died of hunger and cold. No burial was possible. A robin redbreast, page 90, covered the dead bodies with leaves. Now, as the author says, this story was carved on a wooden slab above the chimney piece in the great hall of the large mansion. Almost the whole story up to the lines which say that, quote, the robin breast piously did cover them with leaves, unquote, was thus carved on the wood. Thus, the story remained there for long, and as it refers to a family scandal, one of the owners of the house later on pulled down the wooden slab and replaced it with a marble slab without any story on it. 3. And all its old ornaments stripped and carried away to the owner's other house, where they were set up, would be foolish indeed. Para. In these lines, father tells his children about the house in Norfolk in which Mrs. Field, his grandmother, lived in a dignified style till her death. The owner of the house had purchased a large fashionable house in a nearby village and began to live there. When the old house had become almost ruined, it was demolished by the owner and its furniture were removed to his new house. Now the father says that these furniture, which were very old-fashioned, seemed out of place in a new and up-to-date building. Suppose a man removed the tombs of the great men in the famous Westminster Abbey and fitted them in the fashionable and gorgeously furnished drawing room of a rich fashionable lady, say Lady C. Obviously, these marble tombs would fit ill in the atmosphere of the stylish drawing room. In the same manner, the old-fashioned furniture of an old age will ill fit in a new stylish building. At this point in the story, the dream boy John gave his reaction as if by saying that it would be an act of foolishness indeed. 4. I in particular to spend many hours by himself, in gazing upon the old bus of the 12 Caesars, turned into marble with them stop. Para. Here the father is telling his dream children about his experiences when he spent the holidays with his grandmother in the great house in Norfolk, where the latter lived as a caretaker. The grandmother was very good to her grandsons and granddaughters, whom she used to bring to her house during their school holidays. In his childhood, the father tells the children he was very fond of solitude and retirement. Hence, when other children were playing, he would stand before the marble bus which adorned the hall of that great house. These were the busts of the 12 emperors of Rome, called the Caesars, who ruled over the vast Roman Empire from 46 BC to 230 AD. Page 91, 5. I had more pleasure in these busy idle diversions than in all sweet flavors of peaches, nectarines, oranges, and such like common baits of children. Para. Lamb describes the pleasures of his childhood when he spent his holidays in the great house in Norfolk, where his grandmother was the caretaker. Unlike other children, he was fond of solitude, and he spent much of his time in the lonely gardens of the house. Here there was none to disturb his enjoyments. One of his pleasurable deeds was to stand on the bank of the fish pond in the garden and see the fish moving about or floating in the mid-water. Thus the small fishes moved from place to place, but a larger fish would float silently as if in contempt for the frivolity of the small fries. This sight of the frivolous, busy movements of the small fish gave him more pleasures than the sweet and inviting smell of the fruits in the garden, peaches, nectarines, and oranges. To children of his age, the fruits are more alluring than fish, but Lamb had no taste for them. He delighted more in watching the movements of the fish in the pond. 6. Here John slyly deposited back upon the plate a bunch of grapes which, not unobserved by Alice, he had meditated dividing with her, and both seemed willing to relinquish them for the present as irrelevant. Para. In these lines, Lamb gives an exquisite picture of the reaction on the mind of dream boy John when he heard from the father that he, quote, the father, the father, bracket closed, in his childhood delighted more in watching the fish in the pond than eating the fruits like peach, nectarines, etc., which grew in plenty in the garden. In this matter, Lamb was indeed unlike other children who are more fond of fruits than seeing the fish in the pond, bracket, though the latter is a good pastime for children, bracket close stop. Now, as Lamb was telling the story, John had taken a bunch of grapes from the plate on the dining table with a view to eating them along with his sister. The father did not observe this, but the daughter had. While he was in this mood, he had heard that his father in childhood did not very much like the fruits in the garden. Hence, thought the son that he must imitate the father and overcome his temptations for the grapes, and very skillfully place the grapes back on the plate. Both of them concluded that they should not be fond of fruits because their father was not so in his childhood. They thought it improper to like fruits which their father did not. 7. And now, 7. And how when he died, though he had not been dead an hour, it seemed as if he had died a great while ago, such a distance there is betwixt life and death. Stop. Para. In these lines, Lamb tells the children about his feelings when his elder brother John L. had died. John Lamb had died in 1821, and his death was the occasion of the essay. Though John lived apart from the family and was careless as to the comfort of his brother and sister, page 92, bracket Charles and Mary, bracket closed comma, Lamb retained a strong affection for him. His feeling is expressed here very pathetically. Within an hour of the death of his brother, he felt as if a long time had passed away since the death. This was indeed a strange feeling, yet it is a fact of life. Hence, an hour in the eternal world of death is like thousands years of our life. Thus the distance between life and death is a vast one. Hence, when the brother died, it appeared to Lamb that he had died long ago. 8. I missed his kindness, and I missed his crossness, and wished him to be alive again. Para. In these lines, Lamb tells his dream children how a great void was created in his life by the death of his elder brother. He, of course, did not cry bitterly or was not overwhelmed with grief at the death like ordinary men. He accepted it calmly and with a spirit of resignation. But as time passed, he felt the loss poignantly. In his lifetime, his brother was kind to him, though often very angry with him, and they often quarreled. As he thinks of all this after the death, he feels the want of the brother very keenly. He would prefer that his brother should be living, though he often quarreled with or showed temper with the younger. But he cannot reconcile himself to the death of the brother. Thus his grief is inconsolable. It may be noted here that John Lamb was very much indifferent to the welfare of his brother and sister. He lived in a separate house, keeping little relation with Lamb and Mary. When Charles Lamb released his mad sister from the madhouse on his personal bond and assurance that he would look after his mad sister, John Lamb did not approve of this arrangement and left the whole cost of the support of the unlucky sister to Charles Lamb. Lamb devoted the rest of his life to the care of his sister and sacrificed the happiness of a married life, bracket, that is, remained a bachelor, bracket closed, for the sake of the sister. This is indeed heroic. 9. I explained to them what coyness, and difficulty, and denial, meant in Maiden's dash, when suddenly turning to Alice, whose that bright hair was, para. These lines have a reference to the unfortunate love affairs in Lamb's life. The Trim children had requested the father to tell them the stories of their dead mother. In compliance with that request, he told them that their mother's maiden name was Alice Winterton. He also told how for long 7 years he had courted her. In course of this courtship, sometimes she gave him hopes of fulfillment of love and encouraged him. At other times she refused his love. Lamb explained to them in words that the little ones could understand how their mother in her maiden days was very bashful, was unwilling to respond to his advances, and about to reject the love of Lamb. Page 93. At this point of the narrative, he looked at Alice, the daughter, and it seemed to him as if Alice Winterton had become reincarnated in the form of the little Alice. The daughter looked so vividly after the mother that Lamb was left in doubt whether it was the daughter or the mother who was standing before him. The bright hair of little Alice exactly resembled the mother's. Thus the narrator was thrown into doubt as to whom he was seeing there, the mother or the daughter. 10. And while I stood gazing, both the children gradually grew fainter to my view, receding, and still receding, till nothing at last but 2 mournful features were seen in the uttermost distance. Stop. Bracket. Context the same as in the previous explanation, bracket closed. Lamb was in doubt whether it was the daughter or the mother who was present before him, because the former was exact replica of the latter. He was looking intently in wonder and perplexity. To his great disappointment, he saw that the children became more and more indistinct before his eyes, and began to recede farther and farther till they became almost invisible. It appeared to him that 2 melancholy, shadowy children were not there, but only their faces were visible. Thus the vision, the dream about the children that he was seeing was almost shattered. 11. We are not of Alice, nor of thee, nor are we children at all. Stop. The children of Alice call Bartram father, lay they millions of ages before we have existence, and a name. Stop. Para, bracket. Context the same as in the previous explanation, bracket closed. As the children began to melt away and vanish into air, it appeared to Lamb that they were telling him, not in so many words, but through silence, bracket, because silence was their language and not a single word was uttered by them throughout the whole story, bracket closed, what may be translated into human language thus, quote, we are not your children, nor children of Alice, because your children are unborn, as you have no wife, and the children of Alice live in the house of their father, Bartram, full stop. We are mere dreams, creations of your fancy. Stop. We are not creatures of flesh and blood, and we have no life. Stop. We might have been your children if you had married Alice Winterton. Stop. As such, we are only might have been. Stop. We have no existence in reality, and have no such names as John and Alice by which you have so fondly called us. Stop. Yes, we might be born one day as your children and assume forms and names. Stop. but that will be thousands of years from this date. Stop. During these years, if you believe in the Platonic idea of rebirth, we shall be tediously waiting on the shores of Lethe, the river of forgetfulness in Hades. Stop. Not till the cycles of the world's history repeats itself, can these creations of your imagination embody themselves and become children. Stop. Thus the dream children melted away and vanished into air, leaving lamp utterly dazed. Stop. Finished.